crisis this year that assessments haven't been able to go ahead. Why? Because they're based on a model of taking a single snapshot. And if you can't take that snapshot, then the assessment can't go ahead. But there are more fundamental flaws with assessing children on the basis of a single snapshot through a standardized test. Firstly, accuracy. We know that at the level of the individual school and particularly the individual student, standardized tests can be wildly inaccurate. And yet we base not just our understanding of students' current learning, but also predictions for their future learning on this inaccurate data. It's made worse by the high-stakes nature of these tests, which further affects their reliability and their accuracy. And of course, the only way to make a standardized test more accurate is either to increase the length of the test beyond what's reasonable, or to narrow the focus of what the test is assessing. And we've seen more and more of that within our education system. The curriculum narrowed in order to fit the test, rather than the assessment system changed in order to fit the curriculum. But there's another issue with the way in which we assess. We're only measuring what students are able to do unaided. Now, if we're looking at trying to pitch our teaching so that it really impacts most effectively on students, if we're looking to hit that zone of proximal development, as Vygotsky described it, we need to know not only what students can do unaided, but what they're able to do with a level of support so we can target our teaching most effectively. And of course, standardized testing doesn't do this at all. So what are the answers? Well, my second argument is that the answers already exist in our classrooms. They exist in the daily practice of education professionals. We are all constantly assessing our students' performance, both independently and with support, in order to adapt our teaching so that we can most effectively support their learning. What's required is to systematize this and to have a way of reporting it on to the next teacher. Now, recently I was part of a 2-year project into assessing mathematics through student interviews, through observation and through journaling, both the students journaling their own mathematical thinking and teachers journaling their students' progress. And what we found was that it was perfectly possible to institute a manageable system of teacher assessment within the normal school day without massive increases in workload. We found that it did involve investing in education, in training for education professionals, because you really need to know the subject, the steps and the developments that a student will make within that subject. We invest very heavily in Ofsted. We invest very heavily in standardized testing, and yet in our current system, we fail to invest properly in educational professionals, our most important resource. But what we also found is that we got the most accurate assessment results we'd ever had, because they were based on our knowledge and understanding of the child on an ongoing basis, not on a single snapshot. Also, they were able to include qualitative as well as quantitative data telling us how students were doing in particular areas of the curriculum and where they needed to go in order to develop it further. So how do we change our assessment system to something that is better for our students? Well, my third argument is that now is the time to do it. The crisis has pushed the question of assessment to the fore. GCSE and A-level this year will be assessed through teacher assessment because the final exam can't take place. The government is reassuring us that this will be entirely robust, assessing through teacher assessment. So let's say now that we won't go back to a system based on 100% final exam. In primary, testing has been removed completely and not replaced with anything. Why? Because it was unnecessary. As long as teachers are feeding on accurate records of how students are doing to each other, standardized testing in primary is not necessary. So let's not go back there. So how will this change be made? Well, it will undoubtedly involve campaigns and political influence and lobbying, but most importantly, it relies on what we do in our classrooms. It relies on us exercising professional judgment, having confidence in that professional judgment, and saying clearly that we will never go back to the mistakes of the past. Instead, we'll go forward to an assessment system that works for all of our students and for our education system.
This December, the National Education Union hosted the first Decolonising Education conference that was aimed at educators, teachers, school leaders, teaching assistants in primary and secondary to get discussions going around what a decolonised and anti-racist education system would look like. Because currently there is not much space for Black history, Black achievement, Black politics, Black culture to be celebrated in education. You know, there is Black History Month, but really after 2014, any sort of space was erased for that when Michael Gove brought in his new national curriculum. It's a problem because it's a problem for Black children and white children. You know, all children are taught this sort of narrow, nationalistic, island nation version of British history that doesn't reflect the true past. It's problematic for white children. You know, where does this sort of English exceptionalism come from, and so on. It's problematic also for Black children. It is incredibly alienating if you can't see yourself, your culture, your achievement, your histories represented in education, is going to create an alienating environment. And I believe there's a direct correlation between the fact that we've got this colonized curriculum and things like exclusion. Black children are 3 times more likely to be excluded for things like persistently disruptive behavior. Well, I believe you know, you're going to be disruptive, aren't you, if you can't see yourself in the school system. So we'd very much like you to be a part of discussions in the future about how this can go on. There will be some more space for this discussion to be created. But fundamentally, a decolonized education system is about creating an education system that's rooted in social justice, that teaches the truth on the history, and is about rooted in equality for all. So let's build an education system that allows all children to flourish. Thank you.
There will be, and I think this is really important to remember, a generation really of children who have missed out on some of the most formative and important years of their schooling. And I think particularly that is going to be there's going to be a huge impact on children that are currently in the early years foundation stage, whether at nursery, about to travel up to reception, or in reception and soon to be travelling up in to year 1. So just to take EYFS for a moment, you know, to me it really is the most crucial time in a child's educational development. It's the time when they settle into school, where they make their friends, where their social and emotional development is very highly valued, where there's a huge understanding that confidence and feeling happy at school and forming firm relationships are really a huge underpinning to the ability of children to make good academic progress later on. They're a bedrock. And EYFS is somewhere that we place a huge amount of value and invest a lot of time in that personal and social emotional development. It's also a time when children make the most amount of progress in terms of developing their speech and their language, their ability to communicate, the bedrock of literacy, the bedrock of being able to read and write, and all of those things is the ability to talk, to gain vocabulary, to understand about taking turns in conversation, to be able to listen to others, to change your views in the light of what other people have said, all of those things. And that communication and language focus in the early years is absolutely crucial. And again, I'm going to use the word again, but it is the bedrock, it is the foundations. And you can't build academic progress beyond that on sandy foundations. You need to have those very strong, solid foundations built in the early years foundation stage. And when we go back to school, it is clear that there will be just huge amounts of children that we cannot expect to simply skip over that stage and go straight on to a national curriculum, sitting down, listening to teacher kind of learning. And I think it's time really to say that we would want those foundation stage years to be extended, and that practice to be extended further up into key stage 1, having been traumatized through this period, the COVID-19 crisis. Perhaps some of those children might have lost loved ones, or maybe they've suffered trauma in another way. I know for the smallest children, just going out and seeing people wearing the face masks every day is quite scary for them. Hearing the news, hearing parents talking about death and all of these sorts of things are going to have affected the kids that we teach in quite big ways, I think. And because of this, we will need a big focus on personal, social and emotional education when children get back to school. And I think that's going to be something that will need to run throughout our curriculum and not just be a little add-on in a circle time, maybe at the end of the day, if you can get to it after all the spag and all the rest of it that we've had to teach. It will need to be something that is woven through the curriculum, and actually that's how it should be anyway, I believe, not just for in times of crisis, but actually confidence, feeling safe, feeling like there's people to talk to, feeling that you have something to contribute in discussion, feeling that you are able to raise questions and problems that you have. Those are really essential in terms of how children feel secure and confident, and then able to learn academically at school. And I think we'll need a pared down curriculum. I think the one we've got is far too crowded. It moves far too quickly. It doesn't allow children to examine the depth of subject areas or really the links between subject areas either. And more than that, I think this time is obviously a horrendous crisis, but it also gives us an opportunity to say, well, what do we think is important to see in our curriculum? And I think that's something which we need to have a much wider ranging discussion on within the profession.
Sorry, Gawain, I honestly didn't cut you off there, cut it off yourselves. But thank you to you and to your guests as well. Again, there's this thing coming up that when we get back to school, and we will get back to school, we really need to look at what we are going to do with our children. That we don't just go back to the same old things and make the same old mistakes that we made before. So thank you very much. Right. I'm just having a little look. Is Steen there? Is Nick? Are you there, Nick? I just wanted we wanted a sound check for Nick to see if he can get his sounds going. If not, I might have to DJ myself. No, nothing. No, nothing there. Right? No, right. Just bringing in Ed. Hello, Ed.
Hey, we're back in. Hello, mate. How are you? You're knackered.
No, I'm all right. I'm all right. Oh, wait a minute. Here he is. Here he is. Look.
There's Mr. Carston. There he is. Oh, look, he's taking himself to Glasgow.